Hi guys, Gijoe here, and welcome back to my bunker here in Atlanta, Georgia. Today we are going to continue our BBR video series, and today's video is episode number 4, where we are dealing with victory conditions, how to win the war in BBR. As we know, for out-of-box, in order for the Axis to win, they need to control 8 victory cities in the European theater or 6 in the Pacific theater. For the Allies to win, they have to take Berlin, Rome, and Tokyo. Okay? Well, for the BBR, it is a little bit different. In fact, it's a lot different. So let's talk about that. If you go to his book here, you see a picture of his Axis Victory scorecard, which you will receive if you order the BBR card deck from makingplayingcards.com. That's $20. If you don't order it, that's fine. You can print off this rule book for free. And I think I put that link in the components video, episode number 2, in the description box. But there are 2 ways that the Axis can win. The Axis can win first by either controlling the amount of points needed, depending on the game round, which means, if you look up here, if you're playing 8 rounds, and the Axis would need 12 points. If you're gonna, for those of you that like longer games, if you want to play 9 or 10 rounds, then you would need 13 or 14 points for the Axis to win. Now, all right, so let's look here. The other way to win for the Axis is that if the Axis take and hold Washington for a complete turn, or control it at the end of the final round, then the game is immediately ended with a victory. So technically, let's say that you have 10 victory points as an Axis player, but then you hold Washington. That would be a win. Okay? Regardless if you have 12 victory points or not. So that's the 2 ways that the Axis powers can win. So how can the Allied powers win? The Allied powers win by one of 3 ways. They either prevent the Axis from holding the game round points needed, which is the most common way that the Allied wins. For instance, if you're playing an 8-round game up here, and let's say at the end of the 8th round, the Axis only have 11 points. Well, then what that means is the Allies automatically win. Now, if you're playing a longer game, let's say you're playing 10 rounds, and then if you get to the 10th round, at the end of the 10th round, if the Axis have 13 or less points, then the Allies would automatically win. And that's really the most common way that the Allies win the game. And the reason behind that thinking is, it was the Axis' war to win. They were on the initiative. They're the one that started the war. And we, as the Allies, we basically had to stop them in the Pacific. And, we didn't take Tokyo. Yes, we took Berlin. Yes, we took Rome. But we didn't take Tokyo, and yet we still won the war. So that kind of makes the out-of-box victory conditions a little bit unrealistic. Okay, that's the first way, most common way. The other way is to capture and hold Berlin for 1 turn, or control it at the end of the final round. So, for instance, if the Russians or whomever come in and take Berlin, and then Berlin is not liberated by the end of Germany's next turn, it's an automatic Allied victory, okay? And the same applies to Tokyo. So if the United States comes, let's say they take Tokyo on round 6, and if Japan is not able to take Tokyo back by the end of their J7 turn, then the game is automatically over, okay? So that's essentially the nuts and bolts of the victory, how to win the war for both powers. So let's take a little bit more specific look here into the victory points now. This is the card that you're going to get if you order the card deck from makingplayingcards.com. And you see the points listed here. Tokyo, Berlin, Rome, Shanghai, Warsaw. That's what the Axis start with. It's 5 points in the green. The gold one, Paris, Philippines, and Hong Kong, are points that should fall between the 1st and 3rd or 4th rounds. So by the end of the 4th round, the Axis should have 8 points. And they may have more. So what they have then is they have then the remainder of the rounds, whether it be 8 or 10, however many rounds you're playing, to gather the rest of their points, which may come from victory cities such as these: Egypt, London, Moscow, Sydney, Stalingrad, Calcutta, Leningrad, Honolulu, and then in the big latest card, Cyrus has also added Ottawa and San Francisco. Okay, so these points, of course, they're laid out here. Now, I've laid out my little victory point roundels here that I use to keep track. These are made by Sire Blood. Okay, if you see it turned over red, that means it has been captured or acquired. If it is grayed out, that means it is still up for grabs, or the allies own that point. Okay, now I typically keep my victory point roundels over here, off to the side. But what I'm doing is I'm putting them on the map so you can see them. All right. So the victory cities are pretty straightforward, right? There's no reason to look at those. You should be familiar with those. But let's talk about some of these regions of the map down here. You have World Oil 1, which means Axis controls 4 of 10 oil territories. Okay, now the oil territories are marked by the oil derricks. You have 1 in Romania, 2 in Caucasus, 3 Iraq, 4 Iran, and 5 in Saudi Arabia. So there's 5 on the European side. There are 5 over here on the Pacific side: Sumatra, Java, Borneo, Celebes, and Dutch New Guinea. So in order to get 1 point, Axis need to control 4 of the 10. And that could be any combination of that. You can maybe control Romania and Iraq in Europe, and then Japan control Borneo, Celebes. That will be your 4, which would give you 1 point. Okay? So any combination of those 10, 4 of those 10 would get you 1 point. The other one is World Oil 2, which means you control 7 of the 10. So if you can control 7 of the 10, then you would get 2 victory points. 1 for World Oil Point 1, 1 for World Oil Point 2. The Atlantic Wall means 4 ground units in each territory: Norway, Denmark, Normandy, or Holland. Okay, so obviously we know what those territories are: Normandy, Holland, Denmark, and Norway. And there have to be 4 Axis ground units on every single one of these territories by the end of the 8th round. Now, that's a point that typically is gone for in the very late rounds, round 7 or 8. And that can be a combined effort between Italy, railing up into here, and Germany, okay? But it has to be ground units, at least 4. Of course, you can have air units, you can have planes and such in there. But let's say, for instance, that the Allies in the late rounds invade Normandy, or try to invade Normandy, and they knock the land units down to where there's only 3 land units in Normandy. Well, then that would negate the entire wall point, okay, for that. The Mediterranean, no Allied territories in Sea Zone 95 to 99. Well, that's right here. So you have 95, 96, 97, 98, 99. Now what that means is none of these islands can be allied. So Sardinia, Sicily, if those are taken by the Allies, they have to be taken back. Malta has to be taken, Crete has to be taken, and so does Cyprus. So that's typically a point that Italy would go for, right? So all of these, so you'd have to take Malta, Crete, and Cyprus in order to gain the Mediterranean point. All right. The next one is resources. Axis controls 3 of 5 resource territories. The resources are marked by these little symbols here, like you see in West Ukraine. There's 1 in West Ukraine, Caucasus, 1 in the Urals, and 1 in Siberia. And those are historically accurate areas of the world where resources were found. And so, Germany, of course, went down into Caucasus to try to get some oil and resources and such. And so that is historically accurate, as I said. So any combination of those 3. So Japan could grab Siberia, and then Germany could get, Western Ukraine, and boom, they've got the resources point. Okay? South Asia is controlling Burma, Shan State, Siam, Malaya, and French Indochina. So obviously, you control all of these territories right here. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. That would be the South Asia point. Okay? That's harder than you think, especially with Anzac coming up here being a pest. of course, and then a strong India right here makes the South Asia point very difficult to obtain. All right. China, of course, if you take all the Chinese territories, you get a victory point, okay? Now, even though these points right here are not worth anything, and if you've watched episode 3, which deals with Sire Blood's bloodbath map, you know that these are not worth anything. But still, you have to control all of the original Chinese territories. And if you do so, by the end of the 8th round, you will get the China victory point, all right? Africa Horn, Sudan, Kenya, Ethiopia, British and Italian Somaliland. So the Africa Horn is right here. These two territories, and this. That's a hard point for the Axis to get, because that is usually, these Italian troops right here are usually killed on UK1 before they get an opportunity to fight. So unless the dice are just not in the favor of UK, that point falls pretty quickly, and it's hard to obtain, especially if Egypt is kept. So holding Egypt is the gate to the Horn of Africa as well as the oil of the Middle East. New Rome. New Rome is all North Africa, Greece, Crete, and all originally controlled Italian territories. So essentially, all of North Africa, so from Morocco all the way to Egypt, right? Greece and Crete, okay? As well as all originally controlled Italian territories, which border the Mediterranean. So you'd have to still have Albania and then all of these islands plus right here, okay? Plus Italian Libya. All right. The cool thing is, what's interesting is Cairo is a point in itself. So if you own Cairo, it actually works as the point for Cairo, and it also works as one of the objectives needed to obtain another point, okay? So that's the New Rome point. And the last one is the Pacific Island point, which any 4 originally controlled United States or UK Pacific Ocean islands. Now, that's the Pacific Ocean. So this little island right here, Ceylon or whatever, that's in the Indian Ocean, that does not count. So what islands are we talking about? Okay, Borneo, of course, the Philippines. And yes, the Philippines is 1 point itself for Manila, but then it also counts as one of the island chains. So you've got an island here, 1, 2, Guam is 3. Then of course you've got Wake, you've got Midway, the Aleutians, Hawaiians, Johnsons, Gilberts, Fiji, Samoa, any of those islands. All the Axis need to do, Japan essentially, is to control 4 of those by the end of the game. And that's difficult to do as well, because you have Anzac being a pest, a strong U.S. presence here, a naval presence. They can kind of pick away at any ground gained by the Axis powers. And the point of this is, what Sire has done here is he's essentially put the entire map in play, okay? So no longer are we just going for the same victory cities, but now Southeast Asia is an essential part of the Axis campaign. Island hopping, which basically does not happen in out of box, with the exception of the Philippines and some money islands. But now you're bringing to the point where now Wake is important. Now Guam is important. Now, you know what? The Gilberts might be important. I mean, I think Sire had a game actually end on Fiji because he took that as one of his last islands as Japan. You know, the Aleutians now become important. So I think it's a fantastic way to get the entire map in play. So what happens is every time you play, you have a different gaming experience. It's not the same scripted game every single time you play, all right? So I've gone into really more specific details about these victory points, both on the European side and the Pacific side. I have 2 videos that I made a lot earlier. I'll link those videos in this description. So if you want a little more detailed information and an explanation about that, you can maybe watch those videos if you like. But that's essentially the victory conditions. And once again, if you're playing 8 rounds, Axis have to get to 12 by the end of 8. If they don't, if they fall short with 11 or less, it is an automatic Allied victory. If you prefer playing longer games, you want to play 10 rounds, then you just simply increase the amount of victory points required for the Axis to win. And if the Axis do not achieve their victory points, the Allies automatically win. Okay? So I hope this helps. Again, this is just a brief general description about the victory conditions and how to win the war. If you want more specifics of that, you can definitely download his free his free rule book. That link is found in episode number 2, components video of this BBR series. All right, guys, thanks for watching. Well, hopefully this video has helped you in learning the different victory conditions of the Bloodbath rule set. So now you know.
And knowing is half the battle.
Gijoe!